A crown glitters brightest on a child's head, but behind the gold lies silence. For centuries, royal daughters were currency, traded across empires, veiled in silk, and wed to strangers. Too young to choose, too valuable to ignore, they became pawns in dynastic games. Some obeyed, some resisted, a few rewrote history. These are not fairy tales, but chronicles of survival, where girlhood ended at the altar. From France to the Mongol steppe, Denmark to Constantinople, they wore crowns like armor. Their names are whispered in footnotes, their pain buried beneath titles. But the truth remains, every crown has a cost. She was 15, a princess of Spain, raised among crusades and cathedrals. Her name, Catherine of Aragon. Her destiny, England. Her mission, to marry the crown prince, Arthur Tudor. Arthur was also 15, frail, pale, and groomed as heir to a shaky dynasty. Their marriage was no love story. It was a pact, an alliance between two kingdoms, sealed by two children who could barely sign their names. The wedding took place in 1501. A golden gown, Spanish lace, thousands watching. But behind the pageantry lay something colder, uncertainty, fear, and ignorance. After the celebration, they were sent to Ludlow Castle, alone. No parents, no advisors, only duty and expectation. Within months, they fell ill. Fever, blood, dread. Arthur died. Catherine survived. A widow at 16, with no husband, no status, no future. But her story didn't end there. She stayed in England. She claimed the marriage had never been consummated, that in the eyes of God, she was still untouched. She waited, she prayed, and in time, she married Arthur's younger brother, Henry VIII. For years, they were happy, until the throne demanded an heir, and Catherine could not deliver. The night in Ludlow, that one marriage, that one unanswered question, returned like a ghost. Had she told the truth? Had she lied? What followed wasn't just a divorce, it was a rupture. England broke from Rome, Europe split apart, and it all began with two teenagers, a wedding in gold, and a question never truly resolved. Catherine became a queen, but the price was her youth, her dignity, and in the end, her crown. She was 6 days old when her father died. With his final breath, Mary Stuart became Queen of Scotland. A crown heavier than her cradle, inherited before her first smile. At 5, she was sent to France, not for safety, but for strategy. Raised at court, draped in silk, trained to charm. Her fate was already sealed, to marry the French heir, Francis. He was a year younger, delicate, shy, and always ill. Together, they were royal children shaped into tools for empires. At 15, Mary became a bride. The wedding was a spectacle at Notre Dame. White satin, silver embroidery, she looked like an angel. But this was no fairy tale. Francis recoiled from crowds, his health declining. Mary, taller and sharper, navigated court life with poise. She brought more than grace, she brought acclaim. Through Tudor blood, she was a threat to England's throne. In 1559, a freak accident killed France's king, a shattered lance to the eye. Suddenly, Francis and Mary were king and queen, Scotland, France, and maybe England, all in the hands of teenagers. But power built on sickness rarely lasts. 17 months later, Francis was dead. An ear infection, a brain abscess. History is unsure. Mary was 17, a double widow, wearing 2 crowns and no protection. The French court turned cold. Catherine de' Medici, Francis's mother, seized power. Mary, now a foreign inconvenience, was cast out. She returned to Scotland, a land she barely knew, to rule a kingdom torn by religion and greed. Her future would spiral into scandal, betrayal, and eventually the axe. But it began here. A child bride, a sickly boy king, and a marriage dressed in diamonds, but forged in silence. She was crowned before she could crawl, but her fall would echo for centuries. She was 6 years old, a princess of France, daughter of King Charles VI, born into a court of opulence, but haunted by madness and war. Her name, Isabella of Valois. Her fate: to stop the 100 Years' War with her tiny hands. In 1396, peace was fragile. Treaties cracked like old glass. England and France needed something symbolic, something binding. So they offered a child. Her groom, King Richard II of England. He was 29, a widower, desperate for legitimacy. His throne wobbled beneath him, enemies circling. He needed a French alliance. What he got was a child bride. The marriage caused outrage. Even in an age where royal unions ignored love, a 6-year-old girl marrying a grown man shocked the court. Yet the wedding went ahead. In Calais, little Isabella was dressed in white and gold, a peace offering wrapped in brocade. Chroniclers say Richard tried to comfort her, promising, "You are my wife now, and I will be good to you." He vowed not to touch her until she was older. A gallant promise, but one laced with discomfort. He brought her to England, gave her dolls, jewels, governesses. But it wasn't love, it was theater. A child queen for a fractured kingdom. For a moment, it worked. The people adored the innocent French princess, but it didn't last. 2 years later, Richard left for Ireland. While he was gone, Henry Bolingbroke returned with an army. The crown fell. Richard was imprisoned and likely murdered. Isabella was 8, no longer a queen, just a political pawn. France demanded her return. England resisted. When she finally crossed the Channel, it was without status, without power. She would marry again, by choice this time. But she died at 19, barely older than a child, remembered not as a queen, but as the price of peace. She was 12, small, solemn, born into a kingdom torn by war. Her name, Margaret Beaufort, a descendant of royalty through John of Gaunt. Her future was already chosen. She would not be a child. She would be a vessel for legacy, for power, for the Tudor name. Her husband was Edmund Tudor in his mid-20s, ambitious, politically shrewd, and determined to plant a claim to the throne. Their marriage was not a union, it was a strategy. And Margaret, barely out of childhood, was given no say. At 13, she was pregnant. Her body, still delicate, was forced to carry the weight of England's future. The pregnancy was brutal. Some said she screamed through the night. Others wrote she could hardly walk again. On January 28, 1457, in the cold stone walls of Pembroke Castle, she gave birth to a son, Henry Tudor, her only child. But survival came at a cost. The birth left her physically broken. She would never have another child. A girl asked to do a woman's work had paid the price in blood and bone. Before Henry was born, Edmund died, likely of plague, imprisoned in Wales. Margaret became a widow at 13, a mother and alone, surrounded by men who saw her as a pawn, but underestimated her entirely. She never remarried for love, never bore another heir. Instead, she built alliances, plotted in silence, and kept her son's claim alive through decades of danger. When the crown finally fell to Henry at Bosworth in 1485, it was Margaret's victory too. She had forged a king from her pain. She signed her letters, Margaret R., the king's mother. But before the power came the blood. Before the dynasty, a child, and before the crown, a girl who nearly died to make it. She was 14, a Habsburg archduchess raised on minuets and military discipline, daughter of Empress Maria Theresa. Her name, Marie Antoinette. Her fate, France. Her mission, to marry the Dauphin, Louis Auguste, heir to the Bourbon throne. He was 15, awkward, soft-spoken, more at ease with keys and locks than with conversation. Their marriage was a political bridge between old enemies, Austria and France. But beneath the embroidery and powdered wigs, disaster was already brewing. The moment she crossed the French border, her Austrian identity was stripped away. Her clothes, her language, even her dog, gone. She was remade as the future Queen of France. Their wedding was lavish, but the marriage was brittle. Louis was shy. possibly suffering from a condition that made intimacy difficult. For 7 years, their union remained unconsummated. The court gossiped, pamphlets mocked. Marie, still a teenager, was painted as cold, frivolous, even promiscuous. Versailles was not home, it was theater. Her loneliness became legend. In 1774, the old king died. At 19 and 20, Louis and Marie became king and queen, children on a crumbling throne. Marie turned to distractions, fashion, balls, impossible hairstyles. The people turned against her. Let them eat cake, they claimed she said. She didn't, but the damage was done. As France starved, her image became the face of excess. The revolution rose, the Bastille fell, and the golden cage shattered. In 1793, at 37, she walked to the guillotine. No jewels, no powdered wig, just the shadow of the 14-year-old girl who once crossed the border into a kingdom that would destroy her. Her marriage was meant to unite nations. Instead, it lit the match of revolution. Marie Antoinette came to France as a bride. She left as a warning. She was 18, crowned Queen of Egypt, last in a long line of rulers descended from Ptolemy, Alexander the Great's general. Her name, Cleopatra VII. Her kingdom, fragile. Her fate, shared. For her father had decreed she must rule with and marry her younger brother. He was 10. Ptolemy XIII, a boy king, guided by ruthless advisors who saw Cleopatra not as a sister, but as a threat. The marriage wasn't about love. It wasn't even about family. It was about dynasty, keeping bloodlines pure and power controlled. But Cleopatra would not be controlled. She refused to share authority, issued decrees in her own name, placed her image alone on coins. She even learned Egyptian, something no ruler of her line had done. That made her dangerous. The palace in Alexandria became a battlefield of whispers. Factions rose. The court turned. In 49 BCE, she was forced to flee. Across the desert, disguised, she gathered troops. A queen in exile, but not defeated. Then came Caesar. Julius Caesar arrived in Egypt to mediate the siblings' feud. Cleopatra didn't walk into his court. She had herself smuggled in, rolled inside a rug, and dramatically unwrapped before him. It worked. Charm, intellect, strategy. He was captivated. War followed. Caesar backed Cleopatra. Alexandria burned. And in the chaos, Ptolemy XIII drowned trying to escape, just 13 years old. Cleopatra returned to the throne, alone this time. She would rule with Caesar's son, then later with Mark Antony. Her name became legend, but it began with a brother-husband, a power struggle, and a rug that changed history. Cleopatra was not born a goddess. She became one through fire, cunning, and defiance. She was still a girl when her marriage was arranged. Her name, Matilda of Flanders. Her future tied to an ambitious duke known as William the Bastard. He was illegitimate, fierce, and determined to claim not just Normandy, but England. Their union was more than a match. It was a gamble. A noblewoman of impeccable lineage paired with a man born on the wrong side of a royal bed. Many whispered she would never accept him. At first, she didn't. Legend says Matilda rejected William, that he responded not with flowers, but fury, riding to her father's court, dragging her from her horse by her braids. Fact or myth, what followed was real. She married him, on her own terms, and she did not marry lightly. Matilda was no passive duchess. She governed Normandy in William's absence. She signed charters, managed armies, and ran the court. When William sailed to conquer England in 1066, it was Matilda who secured his rear, politically, financially, and with the loyalty of Normandy's elite. While he fought at Hastings, she ruled at home. When news came of William's victory, it wasn't just his triumph, it was hers. She was crowned Queen of England at Westminster Abbey in 1068. The first of her line. A queen forged not by inheritance, but by alliance, strength, and strategy. Their marriage, though marked by fire and ambition, was enduring. Together they founded a dynasty that would shape England for generations. But behind that dynasty stood the girl from Flanders, clever, proud, and never meant to be silent. Matilda married a bastard duke. She crowned a king, and in doing so, became the quiet architect of conquest. In the glittering labyrinth of the Russian court, where brides were bartered and power passed through marriage beds, one woman chose a different path. Her name, Sophia Alexeyevna, daughter of Tsar Alexis, sister to two future czars, a Romanov by birth, but a ruler by will. She never married. In a world where royal daughters were defined by alliances, Sophia defied custom. Intelligent, politically astute, and deeply educated, she refused to be sold into a foreign court or bound to a nobleman. Instead, she reached for something forbidden: power. In 1682, the Russian throne teetered. Her brother Fyodor was dead. Her half-brothers, one sickly, one a child named Peter, left a vacuum. Through a coup backed by the Streltsy Guard, Sophia installed herself as regent. Officially, she ruled in the name of her brothers. In practice, she ruled alone. She sat behind a double throne with Ivan and Peter as puppets. She negotiated treaties, quelled rebellions, and reshaped Russia's foreign policy. But behind her courtly poise, resentment brewed. A woman with power was already a scandal. A woman with power and no husband, a threat. She built her court around loyal women, avoided marriage entirely, and cultivated the image of Russia's guiding hand. But Peter grew older and bolder. At 17, he seized control. The Streltsy turned. Sophia was imprisoned in a convent, her name stripped from state records, her influence erased. She died decades later, uncrowned, unmarried, and unheard. But for 7 years, Russia was ruled by a woman who refused to wed. Not a bride, not a wife. A czarina who wore no crown, but held the reins of an empire. Sophia chose power over partnership, and in doing so, rewrote the rules, if only briefly. She was 12 when the crown was placed on her head. Hedwig of Poland, daughter of Louis the Great of Hungary, descended from kings and saints. But she wasn't born to rule Poland until politics changed everything. Her elder sister was passed over. A male heir never came, and so the crown fell on Hedwig's small shoulders, a child queen in a kingdom at a crossroads. In 1385, Poland faced threats on all sides. The answer came from the east, a union with Lithuania. But there was a cost. Hedwig was to marry the Grand Duke of Lithuania, Jogaila. He was 26, pagan, foreign, and not the man she loved. She had been betrothed to William of Austria, a boy she knew, perhaps even adored, but love held no weight in the cold calculations of state. Jogaila promised conversion, unity, protection. The Polish lords demanded the match. Hedwig wept. Legend says she tried to break down the castle doors with an axe to escape her fate. But in the end, she relented. For her people. At 13, she married Jogaila, now baptized Władysław. Their union created the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, one of the largest political entities in Europe. It was a diplomatic miracle, born from the sacrifice of a girl. Hedwig ruled not as consort, but as monarch in her own right. She founded schools, protected the poor, and reformed law. Her reign was short, but luminous. She died in childbirth at 25, her only child lost with her. But her memory lived. In 1997, she was canonized as a saint. Hedwig gave her life, her love, her body, for a nation. She was not just a queen, she was a cornerstone. She entered the Forbidden City as a teenage concubine, one among many, unremarkable, silent, selected to serve the emperor's pleasure. Her name, Cixi. Born into a fading Manchu noble family, she had no power, no title, only ambition. She learned quickly. In 1856, she gave birth to a son, the emperor's only heir. That changed everything. From concubine, she became consort Yi. From background figure, she became a mother to a future emperor. When the Xianfeng emperor died in 1861, his son was 5. Cixi, still in her 20s, made her move. She joined forces with the emperor's widow and staged a coup. Ministers were arrested, rivals exiled, and the child emperor was placed under her regency. But Cixi didn't sit on the throne. She ruled from behind a silk screen, literally. In court audiences, she listened, decided, commanded, all while hidden. It was a compromise with tradition, but she was no puppet. For over 4 decades, she controlled the Qing dynasty. Through 2 emperors, rebellions, foreign invasions, and reform crises, she maneuvered with ruthless brilliance. She modernized China's military, built railways, and navigated the twilight of empire with steel and silk gloves. Yet her image remains divided, a scheming despot to some, a savior to others. She never remarried, never left the court. She built her world inside palace walls and controlled the fate of a nation from within them. Cixi began as a girl chosen to serve. She became the woman who ruled an empire, not from a throne, not from a battlefield, but from behind a screen, with power sharper than any sword. 10 stories, 10 girls, each draped in silk, crowned in gold, and handed over like signatures on a treaty. They came from different lands: Poland, France, China, Egypt. They lived in castles, courts, and palaces, but their fate was shared. They were daughters, not yet women, asked to carry nations on their shoulders. Some ruled with fire, others vanished into footnotes, a few became legends, but none escaped the cost. These weren't fairy tales, they were sacrifices. For every crown, a lost childhood. For every alliance, a broken heart. Behind dynasties and empires lie the bodies of girls who never got to choose. Brides who became warriors, queens who lived in silence, empresses who ruled in shadows. History remembers kings who conquered, but we must also remember the girls who were conquered first. By duty, by marriage, by the heavy hand of history. Because power doesn't always look like a sword. Sometimes it looks like a veil.